Hello, friends. So, three new developments which are worth getting noted. Let's talk about those. Now, on the one side, talking about the big industries, we have seen a lot of M&As and everything is happening. Big deals are happening. However, the market cap is dropping for most of the big firms. Sensex and all are bearish. So, that development is right, what we understand. And the credit borrowing, the defaults happening, all of those are well there in the picture. Along with that, when we talk about the MSME sector on the other side, they are one of the biggest employers and as a sector, and they contribute near about one third of the India's GDP, and they are a lot of small units spread across the India, which acts as local growth engines and largely driven by cash flows with cleaner economics and cleaner movement of cash with more steady future projections with which are less uncertain and their market is also something more defined. So when we see the MSMEs, that sector is something where credit can be given by the banks because they have the capacity to repay the loans. They have the capacity to create more cash by producing local services, local products, what they have been doing. And in the context of another development that is the cheaper labor law, easier labor law, and cheaper maybe because the number of hours per day have been increased from 8 hours to 12 hours in most of the states. So that is also creating a context of uh, more productivity, although it is not the right way of increasing the productivity, but that also increases the sustainability of these units and offering them loans from the banks is not a bad idea. So their credit worthy is there. The MSME units are fine. Now, in parallel to, we've seen big industries losing market caps, the MSMEs being credit worthy. On the startups, when we look at, then a lot of startups are getting dried off with investors not endorsing them anymore, as we have seen in many cases. The difficulties of Oyo is well in front of us as a case. Apart from that, many other firms are facing difficulty, and that corresponds to a lot of firing happening in that sector. Apart from that, the loans are also not being given to them easily by the banks, as it is not uh, easy to raise loans from banks for the startups for similar reasons of defaulting and a lot of uncertainty, what we see in the normal times, and this is already an uncertain time. So that sector is also facing difficulty. Now, when we study the three sectors, the three different sizes of units, one is big firms, one is MSMEs sector, and one is startup. Then we understand where can the credit flow, where more realistic activities are happening and more money can be created, more economic activity, more impact on the employment, and more regenerating of the economy happens where the most and in the most certain way. So that is to be taken into picture. And within this context, we need to see how the government is has put on regulations that a foreign firm, uh, foreign investor can, so there's a cap now on them investing and taking a shareholding of 10% in most of the big firms or the critical firms, public firms. So that is important because we see, especially in the big firms, uh, they have lost a lot of market cap and their shares are very cheap, crashed in many cases, and a lot of strategic buying can happen, which are in reality a holistic takeover of the Indian firms by the foreign firms, foreign investors. So this is especially done for the neighboring countries, keeping in mind that China is strategically looking to buy a lot of voting rights and critical shares in the Indian big firms. So that is being taken care of by the government. Now, overall, uh, these three different sizes of unit needs different forms of support, and it is important that government uh, plays a role of catalyst definitely, and with right policies in place and right environment to work and succeed. But along with that, the financial system, especially the banks, need to support the MSMEs. The other two sectors are definitely eyeing funds and all to sustain and expand. And those two sectors are to attract private investors within the nation and in fact influence the formal credit system as well. But there are certain bottlenecks in this when it comes to further scaling up of startups in these difficult times. So that gets a bit unrealistic at times. And so maybe it's time for them to sustain their current operation and sustain this period and later on maybe think of expanding. So that these things are developing. These are the important developments happening. In the backdrop, we are also seeing how a lot of firms in China, Western firms, especially from the US, are planning to shift their manufacturing and supply chain from China to some other country. India is trying to attract these US firms and other firms, offering them land and other easy labor laws and whatnot. But we need to see how these firms will be attracted and leave China and create a setup, permanent setup on the Indian soil. That attraction will go a long way if we succeed in doing so. So let's see how things will unfold. But these are the important developments happening, and all the sectors need their own strategic interventions. Thank you.